Hello and welcome to Become the Teapot. I'm Iain.
And so am I.
And as giant-sized January comes to a close, so too does X month. So here we are, the end of the road. But we're not done yet. No, we still have in us one last stand. And then maybe several prequels, quasi-sequels and spin-offs, who knows. All I know is that this week we're watching 2006's X-Men, The Last Stand. As a companion piece to this film, we're going to be reading the seminal Dark Phoenix Saga, which ran in the pages of Uncanny X-Men 129 to 137 in 1980. According to Wikipedia, it's one of the most well-known and heavily referenced stories in mainstream American superhero comics and widely considered a classic. But what will my mate Iain think? Let's find out. So, Iain, X-Men The Last Stand, what are your thoughts?
Well, to be honest, I'm a little bit upset because straight off the bat, there is no Xavier opening monologue.
I know what you said as well. It's not a proper X-Men film without an Xavier monologue.
But it's true, though. It's something that I enjoy, especially these older ones.
There definitely seems to be a correlation between the quality of the film and the monologue, so you may be onto something there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll tell you this now. I did not enjoy this film.
Oh, okay.
I think we've hit my peak of older style films that I don't like.
Yeah, you finally found your level, because in a previous episode you did say you liked this one.
Yeah, I think...
Is that going back and rewatching it?
I think so. If I hadn't gone back to watch it, I think the memory of it I enjoyed. But then watching it last night, I was thinking this is a mess. It's an actual shit show.
Yeah, I mean, I had that impression very much the first time I watched it in the cinemas. Between this and X-Men Origins Wolverine, it nearly killed the franchise, didn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So what is it about it in particular that you find messy?
I mean, I think it's a collection of the writing, the characters, the plots that are just all sort of chucked together. I reckon they just had like a wall and they were just throwing stuff there and seeing what stuck. They're like, shall we have a cure for the mutants? Yeah, right. Shall we do the Dark Phoenix Saga? Yeah, right. Anything else we can throw in here? Oh, yeah, Scott dies. Yeah, all right. Oh, Charles, yeah, he dies as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they had to pick up on the Dark Phoenix storyline, but clearly they didn't want to.
Yeah.
You know, they left that as a dangling plot thread from the last film, and they had no intention of really using that to its full potential. They really wanted to do a story about Magneto and the cure. Mm-hmm. Again, had to be Magneto.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I don't think this is a good film at all, but let's break down the reasons why, shall we? So, beginning of the film, we have the weird bulldog clip facelifts on Charles and Eric, those ones where everything's a bit pulled back and smooth, and looking nothing like James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender, funnily enough.
Yeah, good point. But yeah, he just looks weird. Even with an actor. So if you go back to Star Trek when Patrick Stewart was Jean-Luc Picard, I mean, he looks the same then as he does when this film came out.
It looks more strange because we know what Patrick Stewart looked like at that age.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with Ian McKellen as well, they kept his, I mean, in the nicest possible way, his big old man ears and big old man nose because they wanted it to be recognisable as Ian McKellen. It was just pulling his features back. Yeah, I don't think that scene worked. I think that those sort of age-reducing technologies have come a long way and have been used to good effect. I don't think this is one of them.
Yeah, I think this was the first time that it was used and then people, well, by that I mean me, saw it and thought, that doesn't look right. I know there are older films that tried something similar, but this just looks creepy.
It does. It's that uncanny valley look. It just looks odd and sort of off-putting in a subtle way that you can't quite put your finger on. And speaking of off-putting, we then have the scene with Angel's wings where he's trying to file them off and chop them off. Obviously, this is a running theme with these X-Men films, is having quite a dark opening.
It's quite graphic.
It is quite graphic, which, considering the rest of the film is almost entirely bloodless, you know, all of the fight scenes are completely sanitized. You have this sort of quite harrowing thing of a small child hacking away, and then it crash zooms into the wound for the opening credits.
Yeah, I just don't get it. Well, that's all from the film section. Let's move on to comics.
Unfortunately, we probably have to talk about it a bit longer than that.
Right, so we've mentioned this in the past about Scott being sidelined.
Oh yeah, this is the ultimate sidelining, isn't it?
Yeah, it's you're being taken off the pitch and you ain't coming back.
Yeah, it's very much, I don't want to play with this toy, so no one's going to.
I do know that the actor, James Marsden, I think it is,
Yep.
he went on to Superman Returns.
He did, with Bryan Singer.
Which I think was a bad move because he should have stayed with the X-Men.
I understand why he didn't, though. I mean, he wasn't really used in any of these films, was he?
Yeah, but I mean, so let's say that he lives, and then as the film continues, then Charles then dies. That would be the perfect spot for Cyclops to become the proper leader of the group.
Yeah, this film should be about Scott. All of the roles that he should fill as Jean's partner and as Xavier's heir are there, but instead they give his role as Jean's partner to Wolverine, and they give his role as successor to Xavier to Storm, to give the two more famous actors something to do.
Yeah.
And so they know that at that point that they have to get rid of Scott in order to do that. Otherwise, if you did give those roles to Scott, Storm and Wolverine would have nothing to do, and that was never an option, let's face it, in a Fox X-Men film.
Yeah, I think at this point they are heavily pushing Wolverine to become a team player, some sort of leader.
Well, they wanted him as the head of their franchise. You know, they're making X-Men Origins Wolverine at this point.
Yeah, and then, Storm's at this point, I believe, became a fan favourite, and because of Halle Berry, so she's pushed into the limelight.
It was more to do with Halle Berry, yeah. I think she had won her Oscar around this point. She was in Die Another Day, so she was becoming quite mainstream as an actress. So, yeah, I get why they wanted to give them more prominence, and I'm glad they did. I just wish it hadn't been at the expense of other characters.
Yeah.
Again.
So just talking about that scene when Jean does kill Scott. Am I right in saying that Scott's optic blast brings her back to life?
I have no idea.
I don't get how that works.
I think the film says she surrounded herself in a cocoon of psychic energy, which is about as much explanation as we get. Oh no, a cocoon of telekinetic energy. I've actually written it down. And that's the only explanation we get. So the only thing I can think of is Scott shot the water and hit her in the cocoon.
No wonder that she was pissed off and then killed him.
Yeah, I guess so. And then she comes out in a whirlpool. Her hair's completely different to when she died. She's wearing different clothes. And so she kills Scott.
It's the part of Alkali Lake where they've got the underwater barber.
Yeah. Namor popped by and gave her a quick tour.
You've taken one of my Easter eggs.
And annoyingly, Scott's killed off screen. He doesn't even get an on-screen death. It sort of starts sucking away at him, and then it just cuts away, and they find out he's dead later on in the film.
Yeah.
Such poor representation of what should be a main character in this franchise, but isn't.
Yeah, I guess with that sort of off-screen death, thinking about it now with hindsight, that would be the perfect point to bring him back and say that he didn't die, but they didn't.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't really do that. It sort of would undermine everything that happened in the film. I mean, not that there's much weight to anything that happens in the film anyway, but to then take back the one heinous thing that Phoenix had done to that point, and obviously they then have her killing off Charles Xavier. I was going to say it would feel cheap, but in all honesty, the whole film feels fairly cheap.
Yeah, my exact wording of this is it's a bit of a nothing film.
Yeah, exactly. It's called The Last Stand, and they clearly wanted it to have some sort of finality. They wanted characters to die and there to be big changes, but none of it has any impact because they don't spend any time with any characters that aren't Wolverine or Storm.
Yeah, I don't want to say anything good about this film, but I kind of guess I have to. I get what they were trying to do, and I get that, the team has to evolve and things have to change, which is fair enough. But then they don't introduce any new characters, or at least they don't come across from X-Men 2. So, at the end of it, you've got Rogue without any powers, you've got Storm, Wolverine, and Iceman, and Angel.
Yeah.
And Angel is this character coming to this film, and he doesn't do much. So it would have been nice for them to build a team first, and then kill off some characters.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we saw Colossus in the last film, but he wasn't exactly a major player, but they've introduced him to the team as if he's a main character all of a sudden. They've introduced Kitty Pryde, who again we've seen twice before as two different actors, and they've given Bobby a role on the team Iceman, but that's it. And then they've killed off two main characters to do that. So like you say, you have this whole new team, with exception of Wolverine and Storm, with no history together.
Yeah.
You see a little bit in the beginning, and then you're meant to care what happens to them. Well, especially when everything that's happening is so over the top, it's just difficult to care.
Yeah. I did find out that apparently there was a love scene or connection with Storm and Logan. They were building towards that, but then they decided to then cut that entire arc.
Well, apparently that was insisted on by producers during the second film, which is why they had that weird scene in the tent where Mystique turns into all the different characters.
Right.
Apparently the producers were saying, well, we want you to put these two characters together. And Bryan Singer at the time said, well, why would I do that? So that was the one concession they made to that. But obviously with Bryan Singer gone and Brett Ratner in charge, an equally troublesome character. I don't know what it is about X-Men directors, but they've not got a great track history.
Moving on swiftly.
Yeah, so I don't think anyone involved with this film really cares about comic books, which is strange because it's written by Zach Penn and Simon Kinberg, who have written other X-Men films. In fact, Simon Kinberg went on to direct Dark Phoenix, X-Men Dark Phoenix, the 8th film in this franchise.
Yeah.
So, and the second time, or 7th film, either way, and the second time the Dark Phoenix had been committed to film, and again he didn't get it right. So
yeah, I don't get why you would bring back the same guy to do an equally or worse job of the Dark Phoenix arc.
Yeah, I mean, clearly he's in with the right producers at Fox. There's no other explanation that I can give, really. But yeah, you just sort of fail upwards. So moving on to other things we don't like. Juggernaut.
I was going to try and pull it across the things that we did like, but no, now that you've said his name...
If we move on to things that we do like, this segment is pretty much over. So Juggernaut, what do you think of him?
Well, we all know who he is. He's the Juggernaut,
Vinnie Jones.
bitch.
Oh, I see.
Oh, right. I'm Vinnie Jones, bitch.
I'm Vinnie Jones. Give us that shooter. He's certainly not Charles's stepbrother, so there's no history there with the character. He is just a big angry man who runs into things and spouts memes from a YouTube video.
He's not even that big. He's just tall and they just got a weird concrete head.
Yeah, that weird concrete barnet. And then they've given him weird fake muscle suit as well with those leather straps around it. And all he was there to do was shout, as I say, memes from a YouTube video from back in the day that was famous. And they didn't think at any point, do you reckon this might date? No. This video is eternal. I'm the Juggernaut bitch memes is going to be on for the rest of time.
Yeah, I mean, something that I did realise about him, there's a bit right towards the end in that big fight scene. He runs towards some people, maybe sort of 5 to 10, I didn't really count. And then when he pushes them over, they add the effect of bowling pins falling down.
Yeah, I did notice that.
Why? I mean, I know these films have got a history of unusual sound effects, as we've sort of covered, but... No, sorry, that's not... No.
Yeah, it's a moment of considering what's going on around him. It's a moment of levity that is strange in that context. I think it's just after Magneto says, go and kill a child, and then they put in a weird bowling pin sound effect. It's like, okay. And speaking of Magneto, his motives in this film seem somewhat confused. He is all about killing the mutant cure because his mutation was wrong, immediately leaving of Mystique behind because she was no longer a mutant. He was pushing Dark Phoenix to do evil things and then getting annoyed when she killed people.
Yeah, I don't get it.
He was all over the place. You know, from Chris Claremont trying to make Magneto into a sympathetic and nuanced character, not just a straight moustache-twirling villain. That is exactly what he is in this film. There's no nuance there.
It's kind of like they shot each scene and didn't think how his character would progress throughout the film.
Yeah. He's got one moment of consistency throughout these films, and that is his obvious disdain for public landmarks. He hates the Statue of Liberty. He hates the Golden Gate Bridge. He's furious. If humans try to make statues out of metal, he is not happy about it.
I don't get why he moves that bridge.
No.
That seems unnecessary.
Yeah, because they're all stood on it. So he could have done the same thing by just all getting into a bus and moving the bus over the water.
Boat.
Yeah.
He did those little weird balls that turned into little plates in the second one when he escaped the plastic thing. Just do that.
Yeah. Basically, all of his army, which apparently consists of about 100 people, onto the middle of a bridge and then moves the whole bridge. I assume the idea was that so his army could run across it, but they were already on the bridge. So any bit of metal big enough to fit them all on would have been fine.
Yeah.
And what's more, well, first of all, I don't think the Golden Gate Bridge is big enough to go from mainland San Francisco to Alcatraz. I don't think it's long enough. I'm just throwing that out there. I haven't done the necessary facts, but I'm pretty sure. Second of all...
Fact.
Well, it is for me now. Second of all, have you noticed that the bridge lands on Alcatraz? It's broad daylight. The next scene, when they're all jumping off the bridge, is nighttime.
You know what? At that point of the film, I turned off completely. So I didn't realise that, no.
Yeah, he made a real grand entrance, and then they all just waited 6 to 12 hours whilst the sun went down. Clearly, it was rush hour when they were going across that bridge, so I'm assuming it was about 5 o'clock. So maybe let's say it's the winter. Let's give them benefit of the doubt, say 3 or 4 hours. They've all just been waiting on this bridge.
Maybe they had to hatch their plan. They thought, right, step 1, get on the bridge. Step 2, we have to then move the bridge. Step 3, right. We'll think of that. That's fine.
Yeah. Step 3, meeting. Right, gather round.
Or bring a pen and paper.
So then we're left with, to round out this trilogy of films, the iconic team of Wolverine, Storm, Iceman. Okay, so far so good.
Yeah.
Kitty Pryde, Colossus, Beast, introduced in this film, and then Angel turns up, also introduced in this film.
Yeah.
So that's the culmination of this trilogy, is 4 characters who were introduced in this film and 3 other guys.
Yeah, I mean, Kitty's been in the previous films, not as a main character. Same with Colossus.
Well, not even as a character. She runs through 2 walls. And she's played by different actors.
Yeah, true. It's a bit of a mess. As I said, they should have done their groundwork first. Or even split this into 2 films, have the Dark Phoenix Saga or have The Cure first and then do the Dark Phoenix.
Yeah, let's speak about Dark Phoenix then for a bit, because obviously that is the comic book we're talking about today. We should probably cover that.
Okay.
She's got no real agency in this film. She's more of a MacGuffin. There's this tug of war over her, and she ends up on Alcatraz just killing everyone because Magneto tells her to, and that's about all the motivation we get.
Yep.
So what do you make of Dark Phoenix in this film?
Well, I think that she has got some extraordinary powers. The fact that when Wolverine is walking to her very slowly, his top's tearing off, his skin's coming off, all of this sort of thing. But yet his trousers stay on.
Well, that's consistent with her character, because clearly throughout the trilogy, she has not been interested in seeing his penis. No matter how much he's wanted to show it to her. But she can tear metal apart at a molecular level. Mm-hmm. She's sort of disintegrating things, but for some reason can't disintegrate him. Can she not disintegrate adamantium? Is that in the...
Maybe deep down somewhere she cares for him.
But not Scott.
I don't care.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, the Dark Phoenix in this film is just... I think it's uncomparable. Is that a word?
Not really.
Uncomparable to the comics.
Yeah.
It's like, again, they've sort of gone, right, what powers shall she have? This, that, yeah, right. Film it. Let's go.
We'll come on to her powers and her arc in the comic book, but let's wrap this up by going on to what we did enjoy.
Okay.
Was there anything about the film that you enjoyed?
I liked the Danger Room scene.
Right, with the Sentinel, yeah?
Yeah, it was good to have that included to at least show that they have got some sort of training room.
Yeah, there was a bit of fan service there, because you had basically the Danger Room, the Sentinels, the Fastball special, all in one scene, and then nothing like that for the rest of the film.
But it did sort of show them fighting together as a team. I mean, Colossus passes his powers to Rogue to stop her from getting hit by something.
Yeah.
Iceman is held by Shadowcat,
yep,
which allows a missile to pass through them. I do like those scenes where they are coming together and fighting as a team.
Yeah.
I like the introduction of Beast and Angel, even they were both wasted. And I like the evolution of Bobby. He finally has his true Iceman form. His armour of ice, I guess.
Yeah, you see it for about 5 seconds.
That little list there is literally what I wrote down.
Well, it's better than my list, because I've finished my notes here with good, Kelsey Grammer as Beast. Bad, pretty much everything else. There we go. That's my summation of that film. Should we move on to the comics?
Yeah, please.
So, X-Men The Dark Phoenix Saga, Uncanny X-Men issues 129 to 137. Reading this arc for the first time, what were your first impressions?
Really, really good. I can tell you now, 100% better than the film.
Well, that is damning with faint praise if ever I've heard it.
I really enjoyed it. It's a really good comic. We touched on this era with the Days of Future Past run, which is quite nice that this then leads straight into that.
Yes. So we've sort of done it in reverse order, but we've now read approximately 15, 20 comic books from this era now. So I know you struggled with that one a little bit with the older style of writing, very verbose, lots of text, but you're getting used to that now? You prefer this?
Yeah, it does take some time to get used to it. There were bits that I sort of skimmed through, I guess. I think the bits when you've got the huge text and it's just like a whole paragraph or two, you're like, I can just skim read that, but I don't need to know the ins and outs of that particular scene.
This is what we said during our Fantastic Four run, is that the art tells the story perfectly fine. A lot of time that dialogue is there recapping what is happening in the frame anyway. And I think, as I said, at the time, it's part of that Marvel House style of writing, where you have the artist does all the art, then the writer comes comes and puts the dialogue and the boxes on afterwards. So in many ways, they're just sort of writing what they see.
Yeah.
But you're getting used to that with this story arc.
Yeah, by reading this as a whole, not a comic per week or whenever they came out, per month or whatever, you do find that there is a lot of bits in there that it's like when Cyclops met Jean, and then it would be there'll be this little star and it would say, check out the last issue.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if it was when Cyclops met Jean, then it would be issue 1. But yeah.
That was an example. But yeah, you do get a lot of recapping happening.
Recapping, yes, you do. And yeah, you do have that even with a collected edition like this. You've got lots of references to the previous issues, and we've still got that thing where they repeat the introduction of characters. So each issue they will have, here's Wolverine with his unbreakable adamantium claws, and here's Peter Rasputin who can turn into metal, etc.
For a second there, I was like, who's Peter Rasputin? No. And then I realised.
Peter Rasputin, by the way, has some of my favourite dialogue in this comic. He has his go-to phrase, which he also had in the annual that we read. Mm-hmm. By the white wolf, he says, the traditional Russian phrase.
I saw that come up twice, I think, if not more. And I immediately thought of Black Panther when they keep calling Bucky the white wolf.
Yeah.
Is there any link there at all, or just...
Oh, no.
No,
nothing to do with that. It's just one of those exclamations that characters will give because it sounds vaguely Russian. The other one, at one point Colossus shouts, Lenin's ghost! Traditional Russian phrase. Whenever they're surprised, they shout for Lenin's ghost. Just to recap the plot then, the bulk of the story centres around the Hellfire Club, particularly Jason Wingard, manipulating Jean Grey, brainwashing her to become the Dark Phoenix. He then loses control. She goes nuts and destroys things. That's when the Shi'ar step in and there's a big showdown on the moon. So that's the short version. But what were your thoughts about the comics themselves? Let's go from the beginning.
So yeah, number 129, they are just coming off the back of the battle with Proteus.
Yes.
I think something that we spoke about before, or at least you've told me about.
Yeah, well, actually, it was in my pitch. Proteus Kevin McTaggart was the villain I chose for my initial pitch for the first week of X month.
There you go. So this one could be your sequel to your film.
Yeah, a third attempt at the Dark Phoenix Saga. Just what everyone needs.
They've done this thing again, like they always do, is they spend the first couple of pages explaining what's just happened.
Yeah.
Which is fair enough. And then Havoc, Banshee, and Polaris leave the X-Men. And we also get the introduction of Kitty Pryde.
We do.
So yeah, I mean, straight off the bat then, it's a good comic. It sums up what's just happened, introduces who are the main characters, who's on the main team.
Yeah, and this is part of Claremont's ongoing storyline, changing team dynamics and changing of the roster. Admittedly, he gets stuck in a rut with his own favourite characters a little bit, so Storm, Nightcrawler, Wolverine become very much mainstays, but he did change the roster a bit more. So, as we know, Cyclops leaves shortly after this run. Obviously, the ending of this story doesn't end well for Jean. And at the beginning of this, we say goodbye to 3 other characters. So there's this changing roster and expanding of ancillary characters, supporting characters that they can call on and that can turn up at various points. And they do throughout the story.
Yeah, and then if we move on to 130, that's the introduction of Dazzler.
It is.
And yeah, I think we see the teams that they choose to split off to find these 2 new mutants. So yeah, I mean, it sort of shows how the team can work as a whole and also how they can split up.
Yeah.
I took that as they were off to find out who these people were, not necessarily to bring them to the X-Mansion. The offer's there.
Yeah, I mean, especially with Kitty Pryde, it's very much an invitation to join the school. The same as Emma Frost is there to invite her to the Massachusetts Academy. So yeah, certainly it seems that they're there to investigate first and foremost and find out who these people are.
I think it's not until probably 132 that we start to see Hellfire Club as a whole team. They are in 129 and 130, but 131 and onwards is when they start to investigate who they are.
Yeah, because they get attacked by the Hellfire Club trying to get Kitty Pryde. So yeah, moving on to the Hellfire Club. How much did you know about them before reading this comic book?
Well, they're obviously in first class, or at least some of them are. You've got Emma Frost, Sebastian Shaw.
Yeah.
From memory, that's all I can think of. Apart from that, not much, really.
Because the only other person to appear, I think, in films, well, X2 Jason, Stryker's son, is loosely based on Jason Wingard, Powers in particular. And also Donald Pierce appears in Logan. He's the chap with a robotic arm.
Yep.
But very far removed from what we get in the actual comic books. So
It would be quite nice to see them have to fight the Hellfire Club rather than just the Brotherhood.
Yeah.
They come up too much, I think, in the films. I think they need to have a new team to fight.
Yeah, we touched on this before, where the films are very much based around the same three white men in every single film, which is Charles, Magneto, and Wolverine. And trying to break out of that and introduce new characters, they always end up sidelined, and then we're back to Magneto. And it happened with Sebastian Shaw in X-Men First Class, obviously.
Yeah.
Do they appear in the cartoon? You've watched more of it than I have.
I think they must do, but I can't remember them off the top of my head.
I mean, they've got a very distinct look. Obviously, they all wear lingerie at all times and take their tops off at any opportunity. Their guards have got funny mannequin masks, and almost every one of them is named that you meet.
Yeah, I think there was Colin at one point.
There was Rhodey, Sal, Elton, Jacko, Cam, Mancusi, Skipper, Murray, Angelo, Cole, Rosen. Those are just the ones I noted down. A few of these characters, the ones that Wolverine kills in the sewer, actually come back as Reavers later on in the storylines. They become sort of augmented cybernetic humans.
Okay.
This is something that Chris Claremont did a lot, is he would pull on things that, were sort of not really a plot thread. You could just assume that Wolverine killed some random guards, but he actually brought that back. He would also just drop in random hooks that sometimes he would never come back to. He'd never pick up on that again. He'd just drop it in there and then forget all about it. But he dropped in enough of them so that years later he could pick up on something and go, I'm going to use that. And people would say, what a genius. Look at that. He's been planning this for years.
So our main focus then of this particular run is the actual Dark Phoenix herself.
Yes. So the Hellfire Club have obviously manipulated her. Jason Wingard has. And we see that descent and that growth in power as well. You have her speech balloons becoming heavily shaded and jagged when she becomes that Dark Phoenix persona.
It's not until issue 135 that we actually really see the true power of Dark Phoenix.
No, we obviously knew that she was very powerful. We saw that as Phoenix she was becoming more powerful, but we didn't know the full extent of that until we see what she does at the end of that issue.
Yeah, even the artwork, when she does go a bit crazy, the fact that, with just a single drawing, you do still know that something's changed. She's not the same person.
And they tread a fine line between whether or not she is being possessed or taken over by an external force, or whether or not she is just snapped, not of her own volition because of the manipulation of Mastermind, but of her own accord, as opposed to, possessed, as it later became this sort of external entity, the Phoenix Force. In these, it's a lot more internal to her.
That's something that I didn't quite pick up on. I always thought it was some sort of like space creature that takes her over, but you don't really get to see that in this particular run.
So that was really more of a retcon in a way. The original story is as we've read it. She does these awful things and then ultimately has to give her own life as atonement. They then decided they wanted to bring her back years later. They said, well, we want to bring Jean Grey back, to which all the writers said, well, how can you do that? She's irredeemable. She's done these horrible things. It's kind of like the Green Lantern thing that we had before. In fact, almost identical in that we want to bring back Hal Jordan. How do we do that? Well, we have him possessed by an outside entity.
Yep.
In this instance, what they had is the Phoenix Force, when Jean died the first time, which we didn't read in this arc, it was revealed that she was replaced by the Phoenix Force, and she was in a cocoon, not a telekinetic cocoon, but a cocoon under Jamaica Bay, healing. And in the meantime, the Phoenix Force had taken on her identity and was going around doing all these things. So this Jean that we see in this storyline is actually the Phoenix Force by retcon.
Okay.
But for the sake of this storyline, because we're going to read it as if we were reading it for the first time, let's ignore that fact.
That's fair enough, because it's something that I had in the back of my head, thinking that something spacey will happen, and then they do eventually go to space. And I thought, okay, so this is when it's going to fold that into it, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether it's something that I missed or it wasn't there, and it appears that it wasn't there.
So speaking of going to space, obviously the big turning point for Jean is when she goes into space and consumes a star, which destroys a star system, including a planet full of sentient people, and wipes them out, killing 5 billion people.
Yeah, so quite a lot.
Yeah, quite a lot. First of all, what did you make of that as a moment?
At this point, I didn't think that the Dark Phoenix would stop controlling her. I thought that's the point there, that she's gone too far. They're going to have to kill her.
Yeah.
I didn't expect to see Jean Grey's persona come back.
Because actually, the initial idea was that she would be either rendered comatose or incarcerated or just atoning for what she had done. Apparently, a high-level editor at Marvel stepped in at this point and said, no, what she's done is irredeemable. You can't then have that character going back to being a hero.
Yeah.
The idea was that maybe they would incarcerate her her. Chris Claremont said, well, you can't do that because the X-Men would constantly be trying to rescue her. So it was ultimately decided that that was the point when that issue came out. They decided that they had to kill Jean Grey because they couldn't use that character anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that, actually, because, you can't have someone do something that terrible and then 2 issues later be like, oh, so we're off to fight another battle.
Yeah.
Like, you've just killed something
like 5 billion people. Yeah, I mean, it was a whole planet.
That's ridiculous. So, yeah, I do agree with that. I think if they had just gone, oh, well, it wasn't her, it was the Dark Phoenix.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
Which is kind of what they did eventually.
Wow.
But they did make it so that it was a separate entity, the same as Parallax. So then we have the big showdown between Jean and Charles, the psychic showdown that we kind of see in the film, but obviously with a different outcome. I think that is quite a striking scene. It has that psychic battle where you actually think if someone was watching that from the outside, they were just watching a man in a wheelchair staring at a woman with red hair and her staring back and neither of them moving for a long time.
And then the guy in the wheelchair then just falls over.
Yeah. So to make that quite energetic and interesting to watch, I think it's one of the better action scenes or inaction scenes in the comic. It's, got these real good use of vibrant colours and just two-tone yellows and blues and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's from that point that the comics lean heavily towards the action.
Yes, particularly, and let's get on to this then, issue 137. So this is the big issue, the final issue of the Dark Phoenix Saga. First of all, we know that shit's got real because the Watcher turns up. The Watcher, of course, only turns up in matters of grave concern or worthy of note. So he turned up during the Galactus saga that we read, The Coming of Galactus. He will also turn up multiple times. He is not meant to interfere, but he always does.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, actually, because when Logan stumbles into his little home, I guess, or his little base, when I realised that it was the home of the Watcher, I did have this sort of feeling of dread that all of this will be fine and fixed because he's interfered like he did with the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
But he didn't, which is good.
Yeah, he very much stuck to his oath this time around. And in this sort of era, 60s, 70s, 80s Marvel, when the Watcher turned up, it meant that the stakes were at the highest. He turned up for the big events. The more that time went on, kind of like Galactus when we talked about him, the more they show up, the less impactful they become when they do show up.
Yeah.
But in this era, still, I find that his presence in it, particularly, narrating at the beginning of the issue, he says in the first page that Jean Grey is going to die, but it's no less impactful when it happens. The issue itself is a bit of downtime, all of the X-Men reconcile with themselves, and then we go into the big final confrontation with the Shi'ar Imperial Guard, and then ultimately the result. So what do you make of this issue?
Yeah, I think it worked. Pulling it back to what I said earlier, when the team come together and they actually fight as a team, it works. Not all the battles turn out the right way for them.
Pretty much all of them they lose, don't they, ultimately?
Actually, yeah. Good point. So yeah, they don't turn out the way that they'd hoped. I think I need to go back and read when the Shi'ar, is that what they're called?
The Shi'ar, yeah.
When they came into it, because it did keep saying, go back and read issue 103. I liked that Charles, he says something like, we'll work this out in battle or something.
Yeah, the trial by combat sort of thing, yeah.
There you go, yeah. So I did like that Charles has that sort of history with them and he knows what has to be done. It's either, look, she dies or we fight for her.
Yeah. And I think the important thing as well is, which you wouldn't necessarily know, not having read them before, is that the Imperial Guard are supremely powerful, particularly Gladiator. So by challenging them to a fight, ultimately it was a fight they knew they were going to lose going into it.
Yeah.
They are vastly outpowered in this fight. So this is why we have the build up to it, where all of the characters have their moment of reconciliation, this moment of internal monologue and reflection on why they're doing what they're doing, why they decide to fight for Jean Grey.
Yeah. You could take that out and it would still be fine, but I did enjoy to read that when you've got all the characters either saying or thinking about why they're there or what they're doing. So it does show character development.
Yeah, I think without that, the comic itself would be a lot less impactful. If it was just the fight scene on the moon. I think you have to see the motivations for the characters in order to get the payoff, the pathos from that resolution. If you didn't see that these X-Men were binding together and fighting for Jean Grey and the reasons that they were doing it, then there wouldn't be that same melancholy at the end when obviously ultimately she chooses to take her own life rather than kill anyone else.
Yeah.
In the final battle, obviously, the character that is most affected outside of Jean Grey is Scott, who gets a very good showing actually throughout all these comic books as the leader, particularly on the blue area of the moon, but also back in the Hellfire Club. He is a very strong and shown to be a good leader throughout these comic books.
Yeah, it's a shame that they can't bring that across into the films.
Yeah, or the cartoons or any other media, which I think is the problem, is a lot of people's interpretation of that character is he's never been done justice in other media. This is why, I like showing you comics from this era, because I think you were of that same opinion of Cyclops as well, is that he was the boring stick in the mud, a sort of second fiddle to Charles. But I wanted to obviously show you that, this is what Scott does. As a leader, as a teammate, this is what he can be as a character. Because I think Wolverine obviously has the reputation. He's the character that a lot of people are interested in.
He's the bad boy.
He's the bad boy, which is more sellable, I suppose. But he's not as interesting to me. And I think, again, maybe that's overexposure because he ended up on about 400 different titles. But ultimately, Jean finds an alien weapon on the moon and uses it to destroy herself rather than risk losing control again and wiping out another planet or even another person.
Yeah, which... yeah, it makes sense. It's that sort of kill one person to save thousands, which obviously that's always a hard choice. But in this particular scenario, I think it's the right choice, especially that she chooses it herself rather than someone else going, well, let's just kill you. So I think it's more impactful and more personal that she's gone, I can't control this. I have to die.
Yeah, and it was impactful. I mean, it's not the first X-Men death, but it is probably the first major one, particularly of one of the original 5, and the only one that really stuck for any length of time as well. There's that final line, Jean Grey could have lived to become a god, but it was more important to her that she die a human. And that was sort of the end edict of the comic.
Yeah. Would you say that this is probably Chris Claremont's highest praised comic run?
Yeah, it's one of the arcs that I think gets the most recognition in terms of absolute seminal runs of X-Men.
Would you say it's one of your favourites?
I would, yeah. Yeah, it's certainly up there.
So, we spoke about the comics and we spoke about the film. This week, I actually have a cheeky little Easter egg that incorporates them both.
Oh, okay then. Well, that seems like the perfect time to move on to... Iain's egg hunt. Iain's egg hunt. Iain's egg hunt.
I'm not yoking you. So, there is a nice little Easter egg that I wouldn't have picked up if I hadn't have read the comics.
Okay.
In particular, issue 132. There's a panel in there which is very similar to the film when Jean takes off Scott's sunglasses and or visor and actually is able to control or hold back his optic blast.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, I wouldn't have seen that if I'd not read the comics. So
yeah, it's a direct parallel of that scene from the comic books, isn't it? It's about the only thing that did transition.
Pretty much, yeah.
And she didn't kill him immediately afterwards.
No. This one you did touch on, actually, earlier on. In the Danger Room scene, and also towards the end of the film, Colossus does throw Wolverine, as they call it, the fastball special.
Yes.
But I did like how in issue 137, Wolverine throws Colossus, because obviously they're on the moon and the gravity is not the same.
Yes.
He makes a joke about it, saying, oh, it's time that I threw you, or something stupid like that. Maybe not quite that, but in those words.
Pithy.
And I recently read X-Men Black Mojo.
Okay. Was this in preparation for your pitch by any chance?
Yeah, it was a little bit. But yeah, if I hadn't have read that, then I probably wouldn't have picked up on this either. Ooh. We both know there was a full collection of characters in this film, in the background and all sorts. But one of the ones that I saw at the end battle was a guy called Glob.
Glob Herman. Yes, I think I saw him as well.
Yeah, so he's one of the first ones to be shot by the Cure when they're sending out all the pawns first.
Yeah.
But again, yeah, I wouldn't have spotted that unless I'd picked up that particular comic.
So are you saying that reading comics is giving you a greater appreciation of some of these films?
Not this film.
That's fair.
But yeah.
That character's got nothing to do with Glob Herman anyway.
No.
So.
I mean, reading comics has inspired me to look for more eggs.
And really, that's the end goal in life, isn't it?
Finally, I cannot talk about the Easter eggs without giving our main man, Stan Lee, a shout out.
Yep.
He's literally right at the start of the film. Jean's picking up all the cars, and then the water out of his hose just goes up as well.
Yeah.
Not too sure why.
Telekinesis.
Why is it just the water and not the hose?
I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. I don't think the writers and director know.
But also, in that same scene, our mate Chris has a cameo.
Oh, does he?
Chris Claremont.
Yeah.
I think it's just before the Stan Lee bit, but he's outside cutting his grass.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I like little cameos of the artists and the writers. It's nice that some of the others are getting that recognition as well.
Yeah, so Chris Claremont is known as the Lawnmower Man, and Stan Lee is known as the Water Hose Man. That is their names in the credits.
Amazing.
I am surprised that those two haven't become like superheroes.
Well, Lawnmower Man was a film, but I don't think it was a superhero film. Right, no, thank you for the regs. Shall we get back to the comic and the film and conclude things for this episode? So, throughout the comic book, Jean Grey is referred to as Fire and Life Incarnate. She is referred to as Power Incarnate, and also several times as a god, including one of the front covers, Witness the Birth of a God. So my question for you is, did you ever feel in this film or the other Dark Phoenix film, did she ever feel like a god to you?
No.
Did she feel significantly more powerful than all the other mutants to you?
I mean, yeah, I guess. She did seem very powerful as a mutant, but I wouldn't say that she's up there with Thor and all those proper gods.
Yeah. I mean, in actual fact, she should be above that, in the comic book terms. She is this sort of almost abstract entity, this being able to wipe out an entire star system on a whim because she's hungry.
Yeah, in the comics, she's very much compared to Galactus. In the films, it's just, she's a level 5 powered person.
Yeah, I like how they refer to it as levels 1 to 5 as well. Like, it's just like middle management. Whereas in the comics, you have this whole idea of Omega level mutants and things like that. But obviously, Phoenix herself is even beyond that. She is, as I say, power incarnate. So that is what I wanted to check, is if to you, as someone who hadn't read this before seeing the film, this character who is meant to be significantly more powerful and dangerous than all those around her seemed like it in the films. Because to me, well, she couldn't even destroy Alcatraz.
Yeah.
I know you could say she was holding back from killing Wolverine, but she couldn't even kill Wolverine. So it just seemed like she was very undersold.
Yeah, she seemed like she had all this power, and just the points when she could have used it, she didn't.
There was a lot of talk about how powerful she would become, but you never really see it.
Yeah, I mean, in the comics, she obviously kills a planet. In the film, she kills 2-3 people. So I feel that in the film, she's more redeemable. Yeah. But yeah, in the film, they decided to kill her off regardless, which doesn't really make sense. So to answer your question, no, and the film sucks.
Yeah, and obviously then they have the problems of transferring roles that should have been Cyclops's from the comic books, such as that leadership role, that relationship role with Jean, and they transfer that all over to Wolverine for no apparent reason apart from they wanted to make him the star, and so it lacks any sort of emotional heft whatsoever.
Yeah, that scene would have worked 10 times better if it was Cyclops trying to then tell her to stop or to take control, or.
If it was someone that she had shown to actually have a relationship with rather than Wolverine, who she spent 2 films telling to go away, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's even without building Cyclops' role up. That's even if you just had it as it was up until this point, but had him a little bit more in this film and then had him killing her, it would have had more impact without even making Cyclops a main character in these films.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show how little impact this event had when it should have been, as I say, from this era is the significant event. It is an era-defining event for the X-Men.
Yeah.
And it just feels like such another throwaway film.
When did the comic first start? Was it the 60s?
The initial X-Men,
the
60s, yeah. And this one's from 1980.
Yeah, so they had 20 years to build on these characters and to explore their characters, and then it was a big shock to have her turn evil and then kill people and then die. In the films, they've gone, right, our third film, let's adapt that well-known arc that everyone loves, but not have the time to explore the other characters first.
Yeah. It would be like having Infinity Gauntlet as the first Avengers movie.
Yeah.
It would be like, oh, here's Thanos, he's here to kill everyone. Well, who's this? What's going on? What are these stones?
Who are these people?
Yeah, exactly.
That guy has a bow and arrow. Oh, he's dead.
Yeah, except then what you do is you then have another character behind Thanos just telling him what to do, one that we've seen a million times before, and you have Thanos basically in one location. Let's pick a monument. Let's say he goes to the Washington Monument and destroys that for no real reason. And then, I don't know, a character he barely has any interaction with, Howard the Duck kills him. The end.
Yeah.
Cut, wrap, that's Avengers. Good work.
I think I'd rather see that film. That seems quite fun, actually.
Well, with that out of the way, I think we've both in agreement that The Last Stand is not good. I'm very glad to hear that you enjoyed Dark Phoenix Saga and that you're coming around to Chris Claremont's run.
Yeah. I would recommend the comic, but I would not recommend the film. The only way that I would is if/when the MCU do the Dark Phoenix Saga and they do it justice. And then you can go back to people and say, well, this is the good version in the MCU. This is the bad version that we first got back in 2006.
Yeah. I mean, my hope would be that they put off doing the Dark Phoenix Saga for a third time for a very long time.
Yeah.
But speaking of our hopes for the MCU, let's go on to our new segment, What Would MCU Do? So this is the third part in our exercise in fan fiction, where we explain how we would introduce the X-Men into the MCU and our trilogy of films that would accompany them. Each episode, we say who our team would be, our supporting cast, enemies, pitch, and after credits scene. So Iain, we're going to start with you for the third film in your franchise. Why don't you just get us caught up to date? What's happened so far?
Just to summarise then, my previous two films, the cast that I've been using have been the original five, Iceman, Angel, Jean, Scott and Beast, along with Professor X, Forge and Longshot were introduced in my second film. So we pick up from the fact that Longshot has now joined the team and he has got some memories of his past. Not all of them still, but he knows some of his history.
Okay, great. So let's begin. Your team going forward then. The original five, Longshot. Introducing anyone else?
Yes, so there will be a little introduction to others, but I'll leave that for the pitch.
Okay.
A little surprise in there. Again, sort of supporting cast, Forge and Professor X, not going to be involved with the whole film, saving him for the end. The villains in this, Spiral comes back from my second film, but we also get an introduction to Mojo and his servant, I guess, Major Domo.
Okay, yeah. His Major Domo.
That's a character, right?
Yeah. No, the character's name is Major Domo, and he is also a Major Domo.
Oh, right, okay. So the film then pretty much picks off where the last film ended, where you've got Spiral talking to this creature, which is Mojo.
Shocker.
They're not on Earth. It's a different world entirely. He's confronting her in regards to the failure of not bringing back Longshot. Whilst they're having this argument, the camera pans round and you just see hundreds of these screens with various shows on them, exploring the executive producer role that Mojo has.
Yeah.
He's furious that Longshot was his most profitable character, but he's excited to hear about the X-Men. He thinks that there's more characters to explore as he thinks of all the profits that he could make from them. His plan, if you will, his evil scheme is to kidnap the X-Men. There's various portals that he opens. He kidnaps the original five. Cyclops, Jean, Beast, Angel and Iceman. He leaves behind Professor X, Forge and Longshot.
Right.
He doesn't care for Longshot now. He's got this new team that he can use. When he captures them, he uses collars to dampen their powers.
Right.
Similar to what we've seen in X-Men Days of Future Past. Forge, Professor X and Longshot try to create some sort of portal to find the others.
Right.
Whilst the original five are captured by Mojo, he gets his scientists to investigate who they are and why they have these powers, which is how he finds out about all the different types of mutants. They scan the planet and they find more. This is the part where he starts to kidnap more people to be involved in his scheme. So this is when we are introduced to Storm, Gambit, Colossus, and Nightcrawler.
Right. Okay.
So we see them all being taken. Storm's in Kenya, Gambit's in Louisiana, Colossus is in Russia, and Nightcrawler is in Germany. We learn about these characters that some of them are hiding because they've been cast aside. Some of them are trying to live the quiet life. You know, Colossus helping out on his farm. His sort of power hasn't been shown to others yet, whereas characters such as Nightcrawler have been cast out.
Yeah.
So after he's then captured all of them, he throws them all into various shows. So you've got like a lot of battle shows, Storm versus Angel, Colossus versus Beast, but they both think the other one is responsible for them being taken.
Yeah. It's the classic heroes misunderstanding, so they fight. Happens a lot in the comic books. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing. I didn't want all of these shows to just be them fighting. So I was thinking about other sort of types of shows. So I was thinking about having Iceman, Cyclops and Jean Grey put into some kind of like escape room, and also have Gambit and Nightcrawler put into a show where they're being hunted by sort of Sentinel-like robots. That's going to take up a big portion of the film, exciting sort of fight scenes and all the actions happening there. While on Earth, Professor X is exploring Longshot's mind. He's got some of his memories, but not all of them. Professor X then finds out about the Mojoverse. Forge is able to build a portal. All three of them find their way there. And the way that they win this would be that Professor X and Mojo have a sort of psychic battle, similar to his fight with Jean in the comics. Ultimately, Professor X wins. He frees all of his team, and then when they all get home, he invites Storm, Colossus, Gambit, and Nightcrawler to join the team, and they all accept.
Okay.
Pretty much it. I've gone for sort of a off-worldly style.
Yeah. So you have Professor X having the final battle with Mojo there. Do you not think that Longshot, obviously it being his world, it being centred around him in terms of the storyline of the last film, do you not think he should perhaps play a greater role in the finale of the film?
Yeah, I'm thinking that whilst Professor X is having his battle, then we can see Longshot, he knows his way around. He knows where his team are. He knows that world. So he helps to go free them whilst Professor X has Mojo occupied.
Right. So he's going to have a greater point in sort of liberating the other performers.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there are bits here that are sort of skimmed through, but you do see the characters having some involvement within the fights or within,
So what made you choose the 4 new X-Men you've gone for? What made you choose them?
Well, it's a mixture of my favourites, so Gambit and Nightcrawler. But also I thought about what you were doing as well in your previous ideas, is the fact that you want a little bit more diversity.
Absolutely, yeah.
And when there is that scene when those 4 are taken, I thought it would be quite a nice shot to see them all in their separate countries.
Yeah.
Whereas if I was to choose, I don't know, Rogue and Kitty Pryde and all these sort of people, it would just be these people from America.
Yeah, because that's very much what the original 5 were. It was 5 white Americans. And I know that we discussed colourblind casting. You're not averse to casting any of those characters as different races, but it is still a very American-centric team, whereas X-Men really sort of took off in the comic books when it became an international team, where it had greater variety. No, I mean, the Mojo idea I like a lot. I like the idea of playing with different genres, kind of like with what WandaVision, which obviously just dropped a couple of days ago, is doing with sitcoms and things like that. It could be a very good meta commentary on television and film. I think if it's in a film medium, you could perhaps do it as a commentary on films. So yeah, no, I like the idea of that. I think you could play with some interesting genres there. You would have quite a large cast going ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is the point when you've got enough characters so they can send off a small team but still have a team at home. Because I always find that very odd when they send off the entire team, then the house is empty.
It's the old Star Trek thing, is let's send the 5 members of the bridge crew down to this planet to investigate, whereas you've got a whole ship full of people.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's interesting. I think you could do some really interesting things with the genre tropes and play around with that. Okay. Okay, so your after credit scene, what is setting up for the next film?
Yeah, so in my first one, I set up the Illuminati.
Indeed.
The second one, I set up this one. So what I'm thinking of, because of all these different portals that have been opened, once they're back at home, Professor X's phone rings and it's Reed Richards. His sensors have picked up all these different portals that have opened in close proximity to the X mansion. Professor X tells Reed about it. So it shows off the scientific side of Reed that I think in the MCU I would want to explore.
Yeah. So your post-credit sequence is a phone call with Reed Richards.
Yeah, pretty much, but they could flip it up.
Sounds good.
Right, yeah. Shall we move on to yours then? Do you want to just catch us up on what's happened previously?
Yeah, okay. So first film was the assembly of the X-Men, an international team picking up in the wake of the snap as existing mutants that Professor X has kept under wraps. They are revealed in a very public manner, and in the second film there is a huge backlash against mutants by the humans. In particular William Stryker and the Purifiers, but also a nation called Genosha. The after-credit scene of that had the setting up of the Sentinel program and also the establishing of Mr. Sinister, Nathaniel Essex. And that is where I'm going to pick up today.
So your team then?
Carrying on the team from last time, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Iceman, Storm, Colossus, Shadowcat and Nightcrawler. Were the 2 new additions last time.
Yep.
New additions to that team are going to be Phoenix, Rachel Summers, and Bishop.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm aware that that is growing quite a large cast. I hope to rectify that soon. Supporting cast, I have a lot of the same people returning. So Professor X, Stevie Hunter, Forge, Opal Tanaka, Moira McTaggart, and President Robert Kelly. The notable exception to this is Hank McCoy, who I think by this point has gone off to join the Avengers. Enemies for this film, as I hinted at before, will be Mr. Sinister, the Sentinels, Trevor Fitzroy, and Gambit.
Okay, intriguing.
Yes. So just a little preamble. I'm just going to say that one of the things that differentiated the X-Men in the comics from a team like the Avengers has always been the relationship between the characters and the sort of soap opera feel the characters had. Now, we've been talking about the plots of the film for the last 2 episodes, and we've not really covered that. So I just want to quickly highlight a few of the relationships that I was hoping to develop over the course of the trilogy.
Okay.
So first of all, romantic pairings to be built upon: Storm and Forge, Iceman and Pyro. In this film, Shadowcat and Colossus, or Shadowcat and Phoenix. And of course, the main one, developing all the way from the first film, Scott and Jean. Aside from those, I'd want to see other types of relationships. I'd want to see father-son dynamic between Cyclops and Professor X. I'd want to see this sibling bond between Colossus and his little sister Illyana, the various friendships, and most of all, the family that a group of outsiders find amongst each other. For me, the X-Men were defined just as much by the issues in which they were playing baseball as they were stories like God Loves, Man Kills or the Dark Phoenix Saga.
Yeah.
With all of that out of the way, let's go on to my big convoluted plot for X-Men 3.
Go on then.
And it is convoluted. Okay. We're now post-blip. Based on the security promised by the Sentinel program, Robert Kelly has been made President of the United States. Genosha, secretly under the control of Nathaniel Essex, has become a bastion of mutant prosperity, and more mutants are flocking there by the day. Essex soliloquies in his lab, surrounded by his experiments, tanks housing cloned specimens of various success. He talks about survival of the fittest, speaks disdainfully about the mutants coming to Genosha, calling them weak for fleeing the outside world to live in peace and safety. He talks about being an artist, that genetics are his chosen medium, and that he has found his muse.
Okay.
But he needs the correct materials to complete his magnus opus, and for that, he needs the services of a thief. We reveal who Essex has been talking to: Remy LeBeau, Gambit, who is tasked with locating the home of the X-Men and retrieving something. But first, we transition to a much older Gambit, gaunt, with long hair and sat upon a throne in a cell. He is being interrogated by Lucas Bishop, who calls him the Witness. He's being asked about the day the X-Men fell. We learn a little about this future, where mutants are kept to concentration camp-like reservations, surrounded by wasteland and sentinels. Bishop is the closest thing to law enforcement, and his partner, Rachel Summers, is described as his hound. Trevor Fitzroy, a dangerous mutant that was incarcerated in the same prison as the Witness, escapes and begins to drain mutants of their life force, killing them. Once he has regained enough power, he opens a portal and disappears through it. Bishop and Phoenix give chase. Kel surprise, it's a portal to the past. Bishop talks about changing things, but Phoenix urges against it, not knowing what the ramifications would be. Ripples, not waves, as we saw in Endgame. So they are just there to catch Fitzroy. We're then reintroduced to our team of X-Men, their personalities and their powers through a baseball game. Meanwhile, Gambit has located the mansion. He's broken in. He is discovered by the faculty members, but manages to escape. At this point, Xavier tells them that he has discovered a time anomaly involving mutants. Cyclops dispatches one team led by Storm to track down Gambit, and leads another team himself to investigate the anomaly. Cyclops' team meets Bishop and Rachel. There's a skirmish between them and Fitzroy. Fitzroy escapes and Rachel is injured, so Cyclops takes her back to the mansion and sends the rest of the team off with Bishop. Meanwhile, Storm's team has tracked Gambit to New Orleans. There's some action, a chase scene, and eventually they catch him. He reveals that this sinister fella already has what he wants, and that he also revealed the location of the X-Mansion. Sentinels touch down on the mansion ground and enforce a curfew by order of the president. Everyone at the house is forced to stay there at the risk of causing a diplomatic incident.
Right.
Bishop and his team of X-Men find evidence that Fitzroy is heading to Genosha, and Gambit leads Storm's team to Essex's lab on Genosha, putting them on a collision course in the third act. Storm's team arrives first, they confront Sinister, and we learn his motivations and his plan. Nathaniel Essex was once a father, but his son suffered from a birth defect and died at the age of 4. he became obsessed with the idea of survival of the fittest and creating the perfect physical specimen through experimentation. He believes Scott and Jean to be the keys to this, and has had Gambit procure their DNA in order to clone a child. He plans to use Fitzroy's powers to take the child to the future and raise it to its full potential. As his final act, he has taken control of the Sentinels and is bringing them to Genosha to wipe out all of those that he has deemed unfit for survival. We cut back to Cyclops at the mansion. He's having a moral quandary. He tells Rachel that he wants to go and help his friends, but to do so would breach the terms laid down by the remaining Sentinel and jeopardise Xavier's dreams. Rachel asks him what he wants, to which he answers, "I want this thing off my lawn," and removes his visor. We get our first glimpse of the raw power of Scott Summers, his unrestrained blast as he just destroys this Sentinel, smashes it into oblivion and sends it flying. Big showdown in the third act, X-Men versus Sentinels versus Sinister and Fitzroy. Gambit gains redemption by helping them take down Fitzroy, but the Sentinels are killing mutants left, right and centre and levelling Genosha.
Okay.
The world looks on, shocked and appalled. President Kelly can't deactivate the Sentinels and slumps in his chair, regretting his actions and knowing that his career is over. The X-Men manage to defeat Sinister, but the Sentinels are still wrecking shit. He gloats about how, as the last measure, he's infected the child with a virus that only he can cure. Cyclops, Rachel, Professor X and Forge arrive to help, which we learn is different from Bishop and Rachel's original timeline. Rachel's intervention has changed things irrevocably. Scott and Jean use their powers in combination to blast the shit out of Sinister, just literally shred him to pieces. With him defeated, the Sentinels shut down, and we learn that the baby is not Rachel Summers, as she thought it was, but a little boy, dubbed Nathan. They say that whilst there may not be a cure now, with the technology they have in the future, there may be a way to cure him in the future. But it's a one-way journey. Bishop and Rachel offer to take him, knowing full well that it's not the same future that they'll be returning to, but instead it's Scott and Jean who take on the burden, as Red and Slim step through the portal with their cloned child and it closes behind them. We have a short scene afterwards, reconciliation of the X-Men, Rachel and Bishop joining them and moving forward. That is how the film ends.
Okay. So there was a scene there that a bunch of people being killed off left, right and centre. Would any of your main cast of the X-Men be killed off at that point, or have you not really thought about exactly who would die?
So no, the whole reason that I decided I wanted to write characters out and have a changing of the team, but I didn't want it to be in a sort of throwaway death manner. Death in films and in comic books should have an impact. It should have a reason. It should have a bit of significance. So that is why I decided to have Scott and Jean leave the team through means of travelling to the future as a one-way trip, rather than having characters killed off left, right and centre, main characters. I think that there is a huge amount of mutants just seeking sanctuary here that would be killed in that scene, but I try and refrain from doing it to anyone's favourite character, because it sucks.
So, do you have one post-credit scene, or do you have two, like last week?
Just the one this week. So, back on Genosha. Mutants emerge from the rubble and are attempting to rebuild. S.H.I.E.L.D. show up and announce that they are there to help. But a huge, toppled metal statue lifts into the air and floats back into position. We reveal Magneto, flanked by his assembled brotherhood, who we have been introduced to over the last two films. He says, "I think you Homo sapiens have done enough. Genosha is under our control now." End film.
So I know that your first one ended with a figure, which I think we agreed was Magneto, recruiting Toad. Would Toad also make an appearance then?
Absolutely, yeah. Toad would. Also Pyro and Avalanche from the last film, Raven Darkholme from the beginning of that film. I've been trying to pepper them throughout the trilogy and then obviously have them assembled at the end of that third film.
Yeah, it's something that you've worked towards to build up that team, rather than X-Men 1, for example, when they're just all together.
Yeah, and you have to have a scene where someone says, "Toad has a wicked tongue, doesn't he, Senator?"
Yeah, really like it.
Thank you very much. Well, I mean, those are my thoughts. We know yours, but we don't know the listeners at home. So if you'd like to let us know your thoughts on our pitches or let us know your own, get in touch with us by email or on Twitter at becometheteapot.
Thank you for listening to our pitches. Something new that we thought we'd chuck in for Giant Size January, or X-Month for short. So shall we wrap up X-Month with a conclusion of X-Men overall?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. It's been a mixed bag, I'd say, with the X films, and that includes the 4 that we didn't talk about, plus the Wolverine films and the spin-offs.
Yeah.
It's something that I'm hoping that with Disney's acquisition of Fox, we see an improvement on going forward. I'm hoping we see a greater quality control in that, because I do think there are some good moments, and I think that it's nice that some of these had their own distinct feel, but there's definitely some elements that were lacking for me. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think pretty much exactly the same. To summarise then the last 3 films, I enjoyed X-Men 1 more than I thought I would.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed X-Men 2 a little bit less than I thought I would. And X-Men The Last Stand can just go away.
And I'm going to just ask you this question then.
Mm-hmm.
The comic books, what have you felt about those overall?
I really enjoyed Grand Design.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I think I will go on to read the next couple of books. I think out of Dark Phoenix and God Loves Man Kills, I think I'd say Dark Phoenix is probably a more enjoyable read, personally. God Loves Man Kills is a very, very dark, toned storyline.
Right.
One final point to touch on then is both of our pictures there included the sort of same idea that the X-Men were already there, part of the MCU. I'm hoping that they do something like that. Obviously not our exact ideas, otherwise they'll be receiving some strongly worded emails. But yeah, I think I like the idea that they are already out there and they're hiding away, rather than the theory that the snap caused them to come about.
Yeah, completely agree. But that is just a fan theory at the moment, so
Yeah.
we'll see what Kevin Feige and the rest get up to with their own ideas. But if you do need any pointers, just get in touch.
Right, so that's it then from X Month. Hope you've enjoyed our views, and we hope you tune in for more.
So there's only so many times I can recommend Chris Claremont's run on Uncanny X-Men, so let's try something a little bit different. If you've read Chris Claremont's X-Men and are wondering what other runs are worth checking out, then why not pick up Grant Morrison's New X-Men run, which ran from 2001 to 2004, Joss Whedon's Astonishing X-Men run, which ran often infrequently from 2004 to 2013, or if you want to get right up to date, then jump on with Jonathan Hickman's run, which began with House of X and Powers of 10 in 2019. Ask the Teapot will be taking one more week off, but we'll still need your questions and comments for future episodes. You can send them to becometheteapot@hotmail.com or on Twitter @becometheteapod. Next episode falls on Valentine's Day, so we'll be deviating from our usual format as we talk all things love. We'll be discussing favourite couples, giving our first impressions on WandaVision, and welcoming our very first guest to the show, our girlfriends. Don't miss it.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot about that, actually. Yeah, good point.
You're paying attention then.